Chair Curry, we're ready when you are.
Thank you. Good evening, calling the meeting at 6:05. And the flag, Commissioner Singh is absent, so would you like to lead us in the flag salute?
Sure.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Salas,
Here.
Commissioner Sandu,
Here.
Commissioner Vice Chair Juarez.
Here.
And Chair Curry.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Gonzalez and Commissioner Singh are both absent.
Potential conflicts of interest. Any commissioner who has a potential conflict of interest may now identify the item and recuse themselves from discussing and voting on the matter. Oral communication. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission regarding any item over which the commission has jurisdiction. No action or discussion will be taken on any item not on the agenda. Issues raised will be referred to the chairperson for review. Members of the public shall limit their remarks to 3 minutes.
As a reminder to callers on the line, please use *9 to raise your virtual hand and *6 to unmute yourself. Chair Curry, there is no one with their hand raised and no one up ready in attendance.
Thank you. Statement regarding public hearings. During the public hearing, I will first ask for staff's comments and reports on the item being discussed. After staff's presentation, I will then open the hearing to the public testimony. I will close the public hearing, at which time no member of the public shall address the commission unless specifically asked by a member of the commission through the chair. The Planning Commission will then discuss the matter among themselves and take action on the item being considered. At the request of the applicant, we will be moving special presentation till the end of the meeting. And we're going to move item number 4 on the agenda to be the first item. Is it 4?
You could still do the consent calendar first, but when it
Okay.
comes to the public hearings, the applicant's representative has requested that they be moved up on the agenda. So
So,
we would request that item 4 be placed ahead of item 2.
okay, sounds good. So consent calendar, all items listed under consent calendar are considered routine. The complete consent calendar will be enacted by one motion by roll call vote. For purposes of discussion, any commission member may have an item removed from the consent calendar and make part of the regular agenda. The commission can then approve the remainder of the consent calendar. Consideration and necessary action on the minutes of the April 24th, 2023 meeting.
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Roll call, please.
There's a motion to approve the minutes for April, first by Commissioner Salas, second by Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Sandu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Juarez,
Yes.
Chair Curry,
Yes.
motion approved.
Next item is the conditional use permit extension, CUP 2019-0014, was approved by Planning Commission on June 24th, 2019. Due to the continued impacts of COVID-19 on the community and development timing on March 21st, 2022, the Selma City Council approved an extension of the expiration date of CUP 2019-0014 to June 24th, 2023. The applicant is requesting an extension of the approval for CUP 2019-0014. The projects will also include the approval of a notice of exemption. Staff presentation, please.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Just as Chair Curry had mentioned, this item here is to extend an already approved CUP, specifically conditional use permit number 2019-0014. That CUP was proposing to amend a previous CUP that was approved 2018-0241 to approve a community-based adult service facility. That facility is regulated by the California Department of Aging, and that has specific requirements that it must meet. Also, it has specific facility intentions, meaning that it serves a specific purpose in the community to provide those types of services to adults that are in need of that type of mental rehabilitation or other services that are provided under a CBAS or the community-based adult service services. So the CUP 2019-0014 was extended as a part of a COVID relief plan in 2020, and subsequently in 2021, it was extended for an additional 2 years, thus bringing us here today to observe the recommendation to approve an additional extension for this project as we are coming up on the originally planned expiration of the CUP as a part of the 2001 extension. So that expiration is occurring within a month or so. So what is before you is to is a few options actually, is to take a look as to whether the CUP is going to be extended, or if you want to continue the item. In addition, to continue the item, to deny the extension, or to continue the extension. Those are the three options for the Planning Commission tonight. So, and you may also recommend an extension time period as well. The applicant has proposed a 3-month time extension to be granted to the CUP, just for your consideration. With that, that concludes staff's presentation.
And if I could add, the time extension is as Trevor stated, for what was previously approved in 2019. The extension would be for that same facility. That obviously doesn't preclude the applicant from applying for an amendment or applying for a new conditional use permit to change the use. However, what is for consideration tonight is not changing the use, but extending the previously approved use for an amount of time at the discretion of the Planning Commission. So you could choose 3 months, 6 months, a year. What is, is the will of the Planning Commission. The applicant is here, his representation is here to make their own statements regarding their need for an extension. And I would, defer to the Planning Commission's discretion in terms of the time frame for an extension. That's why staff didn't make a recommendation in this instance, where we typically do recommend a year. This item, from the applicant's point of view, they may need 3 months, 6 months, but I would hear them out to allow the Planning Commission some discretion in what you guys deem fit as a viable time extension.
Thank you. Would the applicant would like to speak, please state your name and address. And time is limited to 3 minutes. Good evening.
East Front Street, was it not on? I couldn't tell. Anyway. Jeff Shepherd, 1814 East Front Street here in Selma. Family's been in law in Selma since 1883, a couple of years before Selma was a city. And we didn't have planning commissions back then. I'm here representing George Kosla. He's the property owner of the shopping center at the corner of Dinuba and McCall Avenues. He asked, received a conditional use permit in 2019 for a hospital facility or medical facility to be built, to be put into his property at 3800 and 3810 McCall Avenue. It's a center north parcel of in that group of parcels that make up the mobile home or the shopping center. When they originally applied for it, that tenant has bowed out. Crestwood Health Services, a national health service company, has stepped in, and they've been working with the state for the last 3 years to try and get funding and get licensing for their facility. They received a notice that they were approved for funding to do the necessary improvements on the property a couple of months ago. That did not leave enough time to engage architects and engineers to draw the plans, to present to the city, to obtain the building permits as required by the CUP. That's going to expire in June 24th, which is a little over 3 weeks from now. In my letter, when I asked for this extension hearing, I asked for 3 months. I sent another letter on May 15th. They told me they couldn't get the architect and engineering drawings done in that amount of time. They asked me tonight to ask for 9 months. That would give them time, Crestwood time, to develop plans to present to the city to be approved. It would also provide time for Crestwood and Mr. Kosla, the property owner, to discuss with the city staff the use and identify it, and if necessary, apply for a new CUP if it's changed significantly from talk anymore. Am I limited in time?
It's usually 3 minutes.
Okay.
It's-
Anyway, I'm here to answer questions. There is approval by the California State Department of Hospitals. They required George Kosla, the owner, to enter into a restrictive covenant for 30 years. And he's done that so that if they put any money in the project, he guarantees it will stay a medical facility within the outlines required by the state of California. So it's not just the city of Selma looking over his shoulder. Anyway, I'm here to answer questions or provide any other information I can.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like, before we open it for questions, anyone else would like to speak for or against the project?
Chair Curry, I do see one hand raised. I think it's Patty Curtin. Patty, you have 3 minutes if you're still on the line.
Patty, you have your hand raised. If you can hear us, please unmute and go ahead with your comments.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Patty Curtin, and I am legal counsel for Crestwood. And I wanted to support what Mr. Shepherd just presented to the Planning Commission for an extension of the use permit. Crestwood has been working diligently with the state of California and the property owner to try and get this use up and running. We did, as Mr. Shepherd commented, ask originally for the 3-month extension, hoping we could get our building plans in quicker than we thought. But I just heard staff mention that they at times recommend a year extension. And if that's something the planning commission feels that they could provide to us, we would be grateful. These type of facilities are somewhat difficult to explain to building departments at times because they require unique qualifications and standards. And the use permit will expire until a building permit's approved, which could take, as I said, quite a significant amount of time. We intend to get our building permits, I'm sorry, our application in within the next month or two, but we're really concerned about the length of time it would take to process. So if the planning commission feels generous this evening, we would be grateful for a year extension as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak for or against the project?
For the callers online, please use *9 to raise your virtual hand and *6 to unmute yourself. Chair Curry, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised.
All right, thank you. I will now close the public hearing, turn it to the planning commissions for questions and discussion.
Is this project the same as it was? I mean, has the applicant requested any changes to their initial application?
Our understanding is Crestwood provides a different type of service than what was originally approved in 2019, which was a community-based adult services facility, which I believe the name changed in 2012 was previously referred to as adult daycare services. Crestwood provides mental health rehabilitation services, which is regulated by a different department by the state of California. So in staff's view, it's a different facility. And the extension tonight would not necessarily be for the services that Crestwood provides, which was mental health rehabilitation. The CUP is for community-based adult services. So as staff has discussed this and reviewed the differences in these type of facilities, what we've recommended to the applicants is that they file an amendment to the CUP so that staff can evaluate it, because Planning Commission was presented something different in 2018 and 19, as well as it being extended. It's still that same facility that was presented in 2018 and 19. So we've informed the applicants group and team that we recommend that an amendment be processed so that staff can evaluate the new services and the facility accordingly to see if it impacts city services in a manner that is different than the CBAS facility, as well as some other standards have changed in the city that would need to be reviewed as part of this. So if the commission extends it for a year, that's fine. But for what Crestwood is proposing and what they're getting permitted through the state, staff believes that it's an amendment to the CUP that would also need to be processed and brought before the Planning Commission as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
So giving them the year would give them enough time to do the amendments and get their plans in and everything, or?
I believe so. I mean, you can ask their group as well. I think there's some things that may be able to be done simultaneously and concurrently. Staff doesn't necessarily have a problem with them submitting their plans for review, but we wouldn't issue the permit for that facility with our understanding that it would be an MH facility, a mental health rehabilitation center, until the CUP is amended. So if our assumption and all the details are pointing to that it's a mental health rehabilitation center, the building permit would not be issued by staff until it has come before the Planning Commission, that their use permit is amended accordingly, and any conditions of approval that are added to that CUP based on the change of use are also addressed in the building permit application. So from where we sit, if the Planning Commission extended it for a year, it would be no different than if they did it for 6 months, if it was going to stay as a CBAS facility. If they want to change the use to something else, staff would support an extended period of time to give them ample time to get their materials together. But as I state here in open session in front of everybody, staff is willing to do things concurrently to try and keep things in a timely fashion to get the facility up and running.
So what do you
So-
think are the chances that we're going to see this again?
In terms of an extension,
And no, in terms of an
amendment.
amendment CUP, because the drawings that are included with this aren't even close to what's actually going to be happening.
correct.
It's a different location.
I mean, you can speak to Mr. Shepherd or Patty Curtin. My assumption is that the amended CUP will occur.
So we'll see it again.
Yes.
So I have a question about really the location for these kind of services. Normally, for any mental health, social services and therapeutic activities, applicants find more a location on the outskirt of towns or somewhere where they can fence the facility, have relaxing location, more greens, more water, that type of thing. It is not normally in a shopping center where there is alcohol sales, tobacco sales, high traffic, noise. That's not usually the ideal facility for these kind of services. So to me, it feels it's odd to pick this location there. I don't think it is an appropriate location for these kind of services. The other thing is it going to impact any of the other locals that are there? We don't know that. And a CUP normally is a conditional use permit for applicants to adhere to their conditions of approval. If they're in violation, that CUP get pulled. However, the applicant is being asked to give a 30-year covenant. How is he going to be able to give a 30-year covenant? He doesn't know if there will be a future violation of the CUP. And if it gets pulled, that means they can't operate in that facility.
The covenant, if I understand it, and Mr. Shepherd can correct me if I'm wrong, and the property owner can correct me if I'm wrong. The covenant basically states is if the state helps fund improvements to the building, that's all that they could do, is that type of facility. I don't know what the provisions of the covenant entail in terms of if any permit from the city or issued by the city is revoked, what that means for the use of that building. I haven't seen it. That can be a question that maybe they could address. They could provide us a copy of it when the amendment comes through. If that's a concern of the Planning Commission, you could condition it accordingly in terms of if it is revoked, we're not liable or, any other covenants beyond the scope of what we're approving is obviously out of our control, right? It's a property owner choice to enter into a covenant, not the city's. We're not requiring them to do it. That's the choice of the property owner. So from where I sit, we regulate local land use in terms of our zoning, our police powers to enforce that zoning. If there's conditions of approval that are consistent with state law and other regulations that we don't necessarily conflict with, and we're within our police powers, and we go through the process to legally revoke that CUP, whatever other covenants they've entered into is an issue outside of what we deal with. So it would be enforceable by the state or any other entity that has entered into that covenant. I know Megan's on the line too. She may be able to chime in on this unless she thinks I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have a concern. How would they contain someone with maybe PTSD or any mental health issues if they broke out of the facility with it not being fenced and it's impossible to fence it, to protect maybe young adults that are walking there shopping or heading to school or whatever it is. So
And I think this type of conversation through a presentation with the property owner at the time that they amend the CUP, I think is a warranted discussion. And that's why staff, in our opinion, this item should come back to the Planning Commission for that type of review and that type of discussion in order to determine if the Planning Commission feels that for consistency purpose and compatibility purposes, the change in use is appropriate.
and wouldn't that be misleading and wasting the time of the applicant and money while they're applying for all these permits if we feel that the use is not a good fit for the area?
In short, it could be. It's at their own risk to do it in that fashion if they want to submit before the CUP is amended. Staff is offering to them at their own risk to run it concurrently with the amendment to the CUP. We can, if planning commission wants us to wait, because you guys don't want us to not necessarily mislead, but not allow the applicant to get into a situation where they're doing it at risk and there's financial obligations and commitment to doing business in that fashion. At your direction, we won't process it concurrently. We'll wait till it's amended.
Okay.
The zoning, is that allowed in that shopping center? Is it zoned for that use
With the CUP.
with the conditional use permit? Do we know, I mean, like there's different levels of illness, I guess you want to call it. Some people are more, require more, a more secure facility. Do we know what level of patients you're going to be housing in that area? Is that something that we need to be concerned with?
Discriminate or determine
Well,
that.
Well, I mean, it's like a prison. You have low,
Right.
low security and high security or
Well,
whatever. So is that,
Again, the other facility is not what's before you tonight. The extension is of the old facility. But I just want to make that clear for agenda purposes and Brown Act purposes. So any amendment that they propose at that time, we'll request that information in terms of what level of patient that they're proposing. I'm sure Ms. Curtin or Mr. Shepherd can provide that information at that time. But again, this is an extension of the other facility, the community-based adult services. That was what the CUP was approved for. If you extend it, they can obviously amend it, or if it expires, they can just apply for a new one for the other facility, either or. I think their preference is that it's extended in the event that they want to pursue one or the other. They can still amend it.
Do we know if any of the services include drug rehab or homeless services? I mean, I don't, because it's very broad the way it's described.
In terms of the community-based adult services center,
Yes, the current CUP.
I believe it was previously presented as veteran services and elderly care.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And under, just to kind of pair it off of what Jerome had mentioned, it was primarily catered towards the mental rehabilitation of veterans suffering from PTSD or other traumatic mental illnesses in relation to, veterans. And it was specifically stated in CUP in 2018 that the facility was not going to be for drug rehabilitation. It specifically stated that and it's also stated in the packet as well, that it's not intended to be used for drug rehabilitation.
Does the applicant would like to comment on any of our questions?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff Shepherd again. What staff has said is the applicant would need to amend our CUP if the use is changed. I believe it will be changed. What we're asking for is an extension, so we don't have to start over at square one. We will have to come back with an amendment to our CUP and answer all the questions you've asked and a lot more. Obviously, if the change and Crestwood would change the use, and that would require an amendment to the CUP and for us to come back. We're just asking for an extension. Staff said a year. That sounds reasonable. We would come back as soon as possible so we don't waste time and money doing something that is not going to be approved. We'd want to come back with an amendment and answer the questions you guys have asked, as well as any others, and then a complete breakdown of what the new use would be. Still a medical facility. I think the plan is that, and they've done this in other communities, and we could show proof of that and how it operates. But just asking tonight, we're just asking for an extension. of the existing CUP. Can make the necessary changes, come to the staff with those changes that will be before this board when the time is right.
Thank you.
Chair Curry, Patty does have her hand raised. Would you like her to?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you once again. I just wanted to answer a few questions. But you're right. We're just talking about an extension at this point in time. We are not talking about what use is going to be proposed by Crestwood because we're not at that level right now. So I just want to make that clear. We're simply talking about an extension so we can meet with staff to introduce ourselves, describe what kind of uses and facilities we operate, and to determine if what we are proposing is consistent with the use permit. I do want to make it really clear that CBAS services, which was already approved for this site, includes mental health services, and that's what Crestwood provides, mental health services. So we are consistent with that aspect of the CUP. But moreover, besides a daycare center, also approved with the use permit, was a veterans wellness center that operated and was staffed 24/7 with caregivers and counselors, with beds, with dining rooms, with therapy rooms. And this is something that also Crestwood works with. So the uses are quite similar. And it's just not been approved for a daycare center for adults. I just want to make that clear. It is true that the use permit does not allow a detox or drug rehab facility, and Crestwood would not operate that kind of facility at this location. So once again, we're just asking for a year extension, and we hope the Planning Commission is willing to grant that to us so we can continue to work with the city on this issue. Thank you.
Chair Curry, City Attorney Megan Dodd also has comments.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Attorney Dodd.
Can you guys hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say Jerome was doing a good job. And if you guys have any questions for me legally on this issue, I can answer any.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'll turn it back to the commission for discussion.
I think that we should give them an extension of a year with the recommendation that they promptly apply for the amendment so that they're showing due diligence to go ahead and go through with that. And then to do it concurrently with staff so that they're also, I mean, it takes staff time and money, city resources as well to get that done and taken care of.
That's why, but honestly, I'm not understanding the purpose of this extension if it's going to be a different CUP or an amended CUP.
I think what it's going to make them do is start back from square one and to reapply for a new CUP. But when they can amend it, it'll save them time.
And money, I think, because then they'd have to start from scratch and have to pay all their fees all over again. Is that correct?
I don't know. I personally don't think this is the right facility for those services. If we want to do right by our veterans, they deserve a quiet environment for rehab. I always think of one simple thing, hail cannon that can go out and can trigger somebody with PTSD to have a breakdown. I don't think that, and we do get a lot of them in this area. So that's personally, I'm thinking they deserve a better location, but that's just my opinion.
But I think that when they bring it back to us, then we can make those recommendations or conditions, or because right now, the way it stands, that's not what they're proposing. Until we get the
I think it
amendment.
is mental health. They still said.
Well, yeah, but they're not
previously, or
saying
now.
specifically veterans or things. I think that it's a general CUP. And then once they bring us the amended CUP with more specifically what they're going to be doing, that then at that point we can make our conditions or.
The current CUP does include veterans' mental health.
That's how it was presented in the
Yes.
information to the planning commission
How it is
previously.
currently presented.
2018. Okay. I do have a question for Attorney Dodd. If we approve this extension, we're approving an extension for a property that has been relocated and for services that very well could be very different from what we originally approved. I just want to be guaranteed that we're going to see it again once it's been completed and fixed, if you will.
If I could jump in before Megan. The location of facility is not changing. So
It is.
No, so the 2018 CUP was for the facility where Fresno County currently resides in the shopping center at the north end.
Yes.
This is proposed to be in the center of the shopping center.
Which is right next door to a laundromat where families hang out and closer to a grocery
And
store where
I
young
don't
children
believe
and
that
families hang out.
location is changing. That location is staying the same as it was presented in 2019. So the location's not changing. It's
So they'll
the
be
use-
kicking Fresno County out and taking over that north end of the facility again.
No, Fresno
No,
County's not.
Fresno County was in the middle
Yes.
Mhm.
and they moved to the end, so that left this part vacant, and that's where they want to put it, in the vacancy.
But the drawings, because I was on the
Right.
planning commission when this was initially approved,
Mm.
were for the north end where Fresno County currently is.
Correct. And that was the 2018 proposal.
Yes.
And the 2019 simply moved the location to the center
Because the
because Fresno
Social
County was
services
relocating
moved.
to the north. end.
Okay, for that reason only, I would like to see that again. I want to make sure that it comes back to the planning commission so we can take a look at it.
In the center.
Yes.
and
Can we make that a requirement?
but if they're going to do an amendment, it has to come back to us, right?
The amendment for change of use will have to
Has
come
to
back
come
to
back
the
to
planning
us.
commission.
So what he's trying to say is that they will not issue the final permit until the actual
We won't
final
issue-
use, yeah, because the use has changed. So the amendment has to come regardless. Because even though they can go through the whole motions of building, engineering, architects, all of that, they will not get the final stamp until
It won't
change the
even
amendment.
be issued by staff
Correct.
to start construction until it's amended. And as I stated, it would be done at their risk,
Mhm.
not the city's risk. So if they want to get started concurrently now before the CUP is amended, that's at their risk. We won't issue as staff. Development Services won't issue any permits to start construction, tenant improvement, tear anything out, repaint the parking lot, change a light bulb until the CUP is amended.
We will see it.
So we will see it again.
Yes.
Are there current security requirements in the current CUP that we're extending?
Was security proposed in the operational statement originally in the CUP that was approved that you would be extending? So there are considerations in the event that a CBS facility goes there and not a Crestwood's proposed facility goes. There is provisions for additional security.
I'm just not comfortable extending a CUP with that many like changes. I just think they just need to reapply. It's not the same use. It could or could not be. It's not the same facility, could or could not be. I just feel that why not just do the whole new thing and be clear on what we're approving? That's just my thoughts, but
And that's a decision for the planning commission. I mean, what we're saying is you would only be extending the CUP of the old use. If they want to propose to do a building permit for a different use, they're firmly within their right to submit a building permit package for something else. We just won't approve it, but we'll review it and we'll tell them that this use isn't approved until they get an amended CUP. At that time, the planning commission can consider that amended CUP and provisions that go along with it, added security, whatever other conditions that the commission deems fit to attempt to allow that facility some compatibility with adjacent uses. Or if the planning commission's will is, we don't feel that this is a use that is appropriate in this location, at that time you can vote it down as well. You can vote down the extension now It's totally within the purview of the planning commission. Staff is presenting what has been asked for. And we've given the planning commission, I think, some options on how to proceed. Staff understands the concerns. And I think that was one of the reasons why an amended CUP was staff's recommendation to the applicant.
Agree. Attorney Dodd did have a comment as well.
Okay,
Yeah, I just wanted to address the question to me previously. Sorry, I was on mute, but now I'm a panelist, so I can talk to you guys freely. So just to be clear, because I wanted to be clear just in case, if they were to proceed with their original plan, if they were to decide, hey, we heard your guys' comments tonight, doesn't look like you guys are super excited about our change in use, we're going to go back to our old plan, and you guys approve the extension tonight, they could go back to their old plan and go on as normal, essentially, in that new spot that was approved back in 2019. But if you guys approve the extension tonight and they decide they do want to change the use, we've made it very clear that they will have to apply for an amendment before they will be issued building permits. So you guys will see that again, assuming that they apply for an amendment. The only reason you won't see it again is if they decide to keep their original use or not move forward with the project at all.
And even though they're moving the location.
So just to be clear, they're not moving the location. The location was moved back in 2019 and that was already approved back in 2019. Am I correct on that, Jerome?
Correct.
Yeah. So they're not, they are changing, they did change the location from the original application, but it was changed back in 2019 and it was already approved.
So the drawings in our packet are incorrect.
I believe some of the drawings from I believe both staff reports from 2018 and 2019 are included in your package. So part of it is from the original CUP at the northern end of the building. And then the 2019 amendment should be in the staff report as well, that shows the change of location to the current proposed location. And that, let's see, what page is that?
Okay, I see it now.
See it now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
there are questions or concerns?
I motion to grant the 1-year extension with recommendation to amend the CUP.
Clarification, how long is the extension?
1 year.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Okay,
Roll
we have a
call,
motion.
please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Sandu first, second by Commissioner Solis. Commissioner Garcia,
No.
Vice Chair Juarez,
Yes.
Chair Curry,
No.
this is a 3-2 vote for clarification.
Thank you. Would you like to inform the applicant? Anything we need to do to move on?
I mean, that was approved, correct? Approved 3-2?
Well, I guess 3-2.
Yeah,
Passed.
so for clarification, the CUP has been extended for a year. We would expect them to meet with staff over, what the proposal is, time frame, and we'll lay out requirements, schedule, fees, all those items for the property owner, his representation, as well as the representation for Crestwood. So we have Patty's number. We spoke with her today. We'll reach out and set up a meeting here in the next week to ensure that it stays on schedule and that not another extension applied for before the planning commission.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Have a good evening. We're back to the same order. Item 2. Variance amendment, variance 2023-0001 was previously approved by Planning Commission March 27, 2023 to reduce the required parking by 4 parking spaces. The applicant wishes to further reduce the parking requirement in order to account for electrical vehicle charging stations and additional landscaping throughout the parking area. The project will also include the approval of a notice of exemption.
Thank you, Chairperson Curry. Planning Commission, Trevor Stearns, Contract City Planner. Before you is an amendment to an already approved variance. The variance that this Planning Commission had made a determination on just within the last Planning Commission meeting, I believe. And that determination was to reduce the required parking from 75 to 71 stalls. Now, what they're proposing now is as we've gone through, as the applicant has gone through their due diligence in regards to maintaining consistency with the building code, specifically the green code, there is a requirement for the development to provide a certain number of electric vehicle charging stations. Now, the electric vehicle charging stations are described, aren't specifically described under the building code. However, as notated on the site plan, it's not letting me. It's on, I was able to do it earlier. Slide one more. As indicated on the site plan, you will see towards the south here, that is where the planned electric vehicle charging station is going to be proposed. They are going to be proposing, I believe, 5 electronic vehicle charging stations or parking stalls suited for electronic vehicle charging. One of these stations is going to take up 1 parking stall essentially. And so what that means is, because they're going to be decreasing the overall total parking size by 1, that means they have to come back to the Planning Commission for an amendment to their CUP because they're not meeting that parking stall requirement. Or I'm sorry, the variance requirements that was originally approved by Planning Commission. So just because it's a difference of 1 parking stall, they are wanting to amend the variance overall. As you can see, the site is very tight. As we described back in April, as we were discussing this project, there's not a whole, I'm sorry, in March, there's not a lot of room for them to get another parking stall. They can, however, it'll be impacted by the location of the existing trash enclosure or the proposed trash enclosure to the north here, as we've discussed with the applicant. So moving forward, in order to maintain kind of a cohesive project where parking is all situated within 2 specific areas, the overall parking lot area here and employee parking here, the applicant is requesting Planning Commission to consider a further reduction from the already approved 71 stalls to 70 stalls.
So 1 charging station takes up 1 space, or all 5 of them are going to take up?
So as we were reviewing the municipal or the green code of the California Building Code, the definitions of electronic vehicle charging isn't described specifically. What is being shown on the site plan are various electronic vehicle parking stalls, which I think total to about 10 or so. And there are only a few that are specifically slated for the electronic vehicle station. So that's where it's going to propose, similar to what we see out here adjacent to City Hall, where we have the electronic vehicle station there, and then there's 2 stalls right there that are allowed for charging. similar to that, where that takes up a parking stall, that's the similar situation here. And so effectively, that is going to reduce the overall total parking by one, because that is going to take up a parking stall. And also, it needs to be sized correctly for a van as well. So that's going to increase the width of the parking, therefore it's going to further reduce where that parking is going to be, or it's going to further reduce the amount of parking because it needs to take up more space. And so as it's been calculated, that further reduction is going to be just by one parking stall that they're not going to meet.
Oh, hypothetically, if all their parking is full, what is the law? Can a non-electrical vehicle park there if they really had to? Or are they not allowed to? So basically, are we canceling 5 spots completely just because we're dedicating them to an electrical vehicle and maybe it might not be in use for an EV? Or are we going to be able to say, well, if all remaining stalls are full, a regular car can park there even though they're not charging?
So I have kind of an analogy for this type of parking stall. If the commission recalls, I think the building code also required clean air vehicle stalls. And it's up to the property owner to enforce parking regulations.
Okay,
Staff won't go out and tow cars because someone's parked in an EV stall,
okay,
let alone a clean air vehicle stall, let alone a pickup truck parking in a compact stall.
okay.
We don't enforce that. So
So that was my question. Is
yeah,
there?
so that's kind of my analogy and my thought on this. This is a building code requirement that the applicant did not address when the building code changed January 1st. I think they had a building design that they had used in another city, and they tried to use that same design, and there were corrections that the new building code requires EV stalls. So the equipment, as Trevor pointed out, will take up one of those stalls, which reduce their overall parking by 1 stall. Now, Planning Commission also requested that the applicant work to have on-street parking stalls, which they will do on 3rd Street because that's the only place that there's room. There's no
Mhm.
room on Whitson or
Yeah, what's
2nd
in you?
to do that. So we've directed them to add parallel parking stalls on 3rd Street.
Okay,
So there should be, I believe, at least 2.
That's correct, yeah.
2 stalls on 3rd Street to make up. So actually, the on-street parking will be +1 from what was presented to
okay.
Planning Commission before with the on-street parking.
Additional questions? Any public comments, please?
There is no one online.
Thank you. All right. And
I move to approve the variance or the amendment to the variance.
I second it.
roll call, please.
Clarity, was that Commissioner Shandu or second? What is? Thank you. We have first by Commissioner Garcia, second by Vice Chair Juarez, Commissioner Salas,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandhu,
Yes.
Chair Curry,
Yes.
motion approved.
Third item, parking space determination. The project proposes to construct a drive-through and walk-up facility located on the southern corner of Sylvia and 2nd Street. The City of Selma Municipal Code allows for the Selma Planning Commission to determine the parking space requirements for any use not specifically mentioned in section 11-17-2 of the SMC. The projects will also include the approval of a notice of exemption.
Thank you, Chairperson Curry, Planning Commission, Country City Planner Trevor Stearns again. This item is fairly unique. I don't know if it's come before Planning Commission before in the past. However, there is a specific policy in the municipal code stating where if a specific use is not described or has a parking standard associated with it in that specific off-street parking standard section, then Planning Commission does have the authority, and it's recommended that Planning Commission make a determination on setting applicable standards for parking for these types of uses. And so there is a fairly limited amount of standards that are in the municipal code as it relates to parking, one of which applying to this particular situation here. So what is being proposed and what's included in the staff report, you can see a site plan of the proposed facility. It's going to be pursued as a site plan. So that's going to be something that's approved at the director level. So it won't ultimately go to planning commission. However, as it relates to parking, that's where we have this kind of differentiation. So what is being proposed is a 1,200 square foot drive-through and walk-up facility. It's going to be a proposed coffee shop. So as we've seen, I believe no, it's in the staff report. The use itself is it's fairly typical around the valley that I've seen, where it's going to be only drive-through and walk-up. Excuse me. So there's not going to be any proposed seating there with that, whether that be interior or exterior seating. So as that is proposed, our municipal code only allows for, or only has a requirement for parking for retail stores and personal service establishments. And so as that's defined, personal service establishments is very vague in order to capture other uses that are associated with that, which would be applicable in this situation here. So as it relates to those types of uses, restaurants are included as a part of that. And the restaurant / food and beverage service would be required to have a 1 parking stall per 4 seats. And so the assumption there being that the actual facility is going to be a dine-in or whatever example of a restaurant or food or beverage sales that would allow for people to sit and consume whatever they're purchasing at this facility. However, in this particular situation, that's not going to be applicable because there's not going to be any seats available, exterior or interior. So with that being said, that's the purpose of why that item is coming before Planning Commission, because we don't have an applicable parking standard for this site or for this project. So Planning Commission, it's the Planning Commission's duty to establish that use, or the proposed parking standard. What we've included here also is some examples that we've seen in neighboring communities of what they've proposed as a part of their parking standard for these types of uses here. And so we've looked at several cities. We chose just a few here that seem the most applicable to this particular use. What's being proposed on site currently, there's 4 parking stalls with 1 ADA stall for the facility itself. What other cities have proposed is 1 space per 250 square feet of floor area, or other cities have proposed 1 parking space per employee. So they don't account for people necessarily doing a walk-up facility. Now, something interesting to note with this project too is that just on the east side of the parcel is Sylvia Street, and on the other side of Sylvia is the park. Right there, there is a lot of diagonal on-street parking that can be used in conjunction with this site. So if it's up to Planning Commission's, it's Planning Commission's determination if we wanted to include a fraction or a ratio of on-street parking to be applicable to this use, such as like a half of on-street parking could be associated with the parking requirement for this project. So it can meet that parking stall requirement for the project. So with that being said, there's a few options that we would like to discuss with Planning Commission and see the overall consensus of what type of parking you would like to see for this facility, because this is also going to benefit in staff's understanding moving forward with future projects that are going to be similar to this. In addition, these types of standards are also going to be built into the overall zoning ordinance update that the city's also going through as well, just to make sure that what we're proposing as a part of policy is going to be the latest standard for new uses coming out. Because I think in the past, I don't think these facilities have been very popular or have been widespread. We see Dutch Bros, Starbucks, all these other facilities kind of doing the same thing, Java Express, all these facilities kind of doing similar things. So just wanted to make sure that that was understood. And if you guys have any questions, we'll answer those to the best of our ability.
Basically, from this site plan, really there isn't any more area where we can add parking or request parking. So even if we want to kind of set some sort of standards for the future, this is very tight.
Well, I think irregardless of the site, because this site plan is going to change based off of some comments from staff.
Okay.
We have comments regarding queuing into the alley and use of the alley as the primary entrance, which we don't believe is even legal under the current municipal code. So that has been communicated to the applicant that a revision would be needed, whether
Okay.
they reconfigure the site to take access directly off of Second Street or off of Sylvia, doesn't matter. What we're trying to do here is establish how do we evaluate parking for walk-up facilities. That's all we're looking at.
Okay.
So irregardless of this site plan, what we want to do is have a discussion regarding walk-up facilities where they don't have, maybe they don't have outdoor seating, they don't have indoor seating. So how do we allocate parking? Other agencies do it on a per employee basis. Some of them doing off structure size. Regardless of how we feel about this site plan, that's really what we're looking to establish is how do we evaluate parking for these type of facilities? Staff believes that in areas where maybe there's on-street parking or we can add on-street parking as with the last item, that should have some weight in terms of the total calculation, whether we count like an on-street space as a quarter space, half space, whatever. I think there needs to be some accommodation for on-street parking in areas where it's available. In this instance, it's totally the prerogative of the Planning Commission to have a seating requirement, square footage, whatever. We're happy to have a discussion and present more information for the dialogue to establish that standard that'll be used. Because I believe we have another facility that's similar to this that is being proposed. So, and as Trevor said, the Planning Commission's decision will also be included in the zoning code update so that we make sure that we don't end up back here again to make the same type of determination, have the same discussion again. So, yeah.
Well, I can share a little bit of my point of view because of my experience.
You have experience in this area?
So for strictly drive up, so there's absolutely no seating. Nobody is going to grab the cup of coffee and go sit there. So there's no seating area. In my opinion, it should be by employee because employees don't carpool. When you have a sitting facility, you can assume safely a table of 4 is going to come in together in one car. So every 4, that's how we calculate, will require 1 parking. But once you have a strictly drive-up facility, a drive-through facility, it's usually by number of employees. And the number of employees is going to matter how busy they are and what do they serve. Is it only drinks? Is it drinks and cakes? Is it drinks and breakfast through that window? Which means that same building could have at once only 2 employees, but up to 8. So I think, and if they are serving food, for example, like certain Starbucks will give you, I don't know, a spinach wrap or whatever, or an oatmeal with your coffee, and they've got several inside, they're going to need to park all those cars. And I would say the way to determine it is usually by number of employees if they have absolutely no seating area. Now, if they have area to sit down, it's even additional parking because now you have all your employees plus your customers that are going to sit.
So for clarification, would it be employees, maximum number of employees on one shift that they would have? That would be
Pretty
the
much.
requirement?
Yeah, pretty much
Okay.
in one shift, because definitely the overlap is usually a very short period of
Correct.
time. while they're handing the shift over to the next person.
Right.
But at once, yeah, while they're all gonna come in the morning, for example, to open that coffee shop and prep for breakfast, how many employees come in at the same time? And that's what we would need to determine, and probably allow one additional parking for the boss, because they always show up unannounced.
How many square feet is the facility proposed to be?
1,200.
1,200.
So if we
Big.
did by one parking stall for 250 square feet, how many would that, then they would require more than the five.
It'd be 5.
It
be
would
five.
be 5.
It would be 5.
If you did 200 square feet, one stall, it'll be 6.
This is the example here is a fairly big facility. I mean, your facility isn't 1,200 square feet per
Right.
se, right? And if we say, if we go by square footage, her facility is very small, so she only needs 2.
Yeah.
But if she has
Well-
4 employees working there or 3 employees plus.
It's impossible.
It's impossible.
So
So I think
reality
it
is, like
implies-
in my coffee
Mhm.
shop, you cannot fit more than 2 people. There's no room.
Right.
It's physically impossible. So it could work per square footage as well. Yeah, if I have a bigger building and I'm offering more products, then I will have maybe 4 employees working at the
Mm.
same time. So
So-
right now I only have 1.
So I have kind of a middle, go ahead, Commissioner.
But I mean, if facilities are also offering walk-up, then those people also need a place to park, plus with the employees. So if you have already 2 or 3 people there, plus somebody walking up, 1 or 2 people walking up, so they have to be able to park. And if on-street is not available, then that's going to create an issue.
So the solution that I have, whether square footage or maximum number of employees, is you could require both, but
Mhm.
require whichever one creates more park.
Yes,
more
that's what-
parking.
That's a good idea.
I think that's
Mhm.
Yeah,
probably where
whichever
I'm
is
leaning.
more.
So it's whatever the calculation that the planning commission determines, whether it's 200, 250, 300, or the maximum number of employees, whichever of the two is greater.
Is greater. Yes.
So
I
I'll
think-
leave that up to your group. But as I stated, in this location, it's sort of unique because they do have the ability to have on-street parking. People
Mhm.
can park at the park, go to the park, walk over and get a Starbucks, go back to the park. They're using the park. They're not using the parking here. So
Right.
But you said they're gonna have to move
they're gonna
their,
have to move the driveway either to Sylvia or Second Street. If they move it to Sylvia, it probably wipes out all that diagonal parking on the east side of the property.
most of it, yeah.
Yeah, so there's gonna be an issue there where there's still on-street parking in the area that they could use that's not necessarily in front of the property. So I think when we go through the zoning ordinance update, I think certain areas of town, you could count parking, like public parking stalls if they're within so many feet of the site or something like that. But
Is there a problem with counting street parking as a 1-to-1? You mentioned half or a quarter of a space
the
or,
issue being that, you count it as a half because maybe they're using it for another facility. They're going to do 2 things. You only get credit for half because another business is also using that stall. So you don't get full
Okay.
credit for that stall. That's the idea behind it. Shared parking is kind of like that in a shopping center where you maybe have different hours for different businesses and there'll be some overlap and you can assume maybe some parking, maybe they'll go when you had Blockbuster and the grocery store, people will go to both, right? So some of the parking was shared. You didn't have a full stall for just the shop, for the grocery store and the Blockbuster. You said they share the parking, so it's kind of half for both.
Well, and also it's reasonable to assume that most people want to park the closest to the building. So they really don't resort to street parking unless they really, really have to. So,
Unless it's the only thing available.
right.
And in downtown, I think that's another issue in the downtown area.
Mhm.
Meeting parking requirements for downtown buildings is almost impossible because you don't have a parking lot. So you
Right.
have to count on-street parking, or you have to take into account that there's public lots within so many feet of the structure, right? So I think the zoning ordinance update, or any zoning ordinance that comes for a downtown area or a plan for downtown, I'm just leaving breadcrumbs for the planning commission in the future. In the downtown area, consideration for parking being shared or consideration for lots or on street should be considered as part of any downtown zoning ordinance. In other parts of town where there's no public lot and there's no on-street parking, I would say that those are treated totally different because there's none of that is available.
Now, on smaller facilities, any requirements for electric vehicle charging stations that we're gonna have to account for?
That's a good question. We can double check the building code for that. And I don't know if it's based off the size of the facility, the type of facility.
Right.
In this instance, they may not have to do it because of the size and type of the facility, but we'll verify. But it would still be based on, they would still have to find room for it. And if they can't find room for it, they would have to apply for a variance at that time.
That's why I'm thinking if we go a little smaller on like 200 square feet per for a parking to calculate it that way, it'll give us that little bit of room in case they needed to add a charging station. They wouldn't have to really come back because then it would be required originally to have a little bit more parking. And so we can eliminate one and put a parking station and electrical vehicles there. So if we, like, for instance, this is a 1,200 square foot building. If we said we're going to require 6 parking spots, that's kind of safe enough where down the road, if they have to eliminate one and consider it an electrical vehicle charging station, we still have the other 5. Or if they needed to make it a little wider to allow for that
I think
unit.
I would do it the other way. I would do it 1 per 250. And if they fit 6 and then they lose one to an EV station, they still have the 5 and they would still meet the criteria. So instead of going 200, I would go 250, if that makes sense. Because if you require more parking and they lose one, then they're deficient.
Oh, okay.
They would be at 5 instead of 6. If the requirement is 5 and they fit 6 and then they lose one, then they're still compliant.
Okay.
Regardless of that, if they have 7 employees, they're still going to need 7 stalls. So
Yeah.
regardless of the square footage, if they have more employees, then that's going to be the
That's going
requirement.
to be required. Okay.
My question for the commission is still the on-street parking and how do we want to count on-street parking in this instance? Because there is on-street parking in the area. I don't know if we want to say within 100 feet, we can count some of them.
Yeah.
No more than 2. Like maybe you say within 100 feet, you get credit for 2 on-street. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of ways that in the event that there is something like that, like an EV stall and they can't find one, or they have to reconfigure the parking lot because we're not going to allow them to use the alley where the building goes, maybe they lose more parking. How can we still accommodate them with on-street parking or a supplement of on-street parking so that we don't necessarily end up back before the commission?
You can't park on 2nd Street. You can't park in the alley.
Correct.
The park does use those stalls. And if they change the location of the drive-through, they're going to lose some of it. So I think in this particular situation, like you said, maybe we'll say we can count 1 extra or 2 off, because I don't know how many of those parking stalls, the parallel parking, are going to be wiped out by the access of their drive-through.
Yeah, the question that I would have, and we would have to check the municipal code, is if they have a driveway in let's say we have a parallel stall instead of a diagonal stall, how far does that parallel stall need to be from the driveway for viewing purposes so that you don't disrupt, people coming out so they can see oncoming traffic? So that can be something we can look at in terms of, can they convert any of those into parallel stalls so that they keep some along their frontage? And in that case, if they can get 2, then there's 2. Count those 2. But I think that's really the question for the planning commission is how much do you want to count in terms of on-street, and then how far from the site are you willing to count? So are you willing to count the ones across the street at the park? Are you willing to count, are there more south? I think there's more south of this property, right? So if their driveway is here directly adjacent to them, right off the property line, there's still more parallel stalls directly south of the site. So,
But they still have to account for a longer driveway, because if not, they're going to block the traffic.
correct. This is a concern of staff, regardless of where the driveway is.
Right.
because we know how these facilities are. This was the concern with the Dutch brothers going in at Floral and Highland.
Right.
You know, and why we had them do their own traffic control plan for having people out there to direct people into the parking lot and out of traffic. I don't think that this is going to be any different, where we're going to have a traffic control plan for this facility as well. In terms of, I don't know, apart from the alley, we don't want it on Second Street because we don't want people backing out on the Second Street. Sylvia seems like the next logical area for the driveway. How do we regulate, you know, queuing? Because then it's just going to go around the corner on the Second Street is what's going to
We
happen.
might have to move the building.
Well, and that's, we want them to configure the site to maximize queuing as much as possible, right? And so whether or not they have an entrance and then there's two cars and then it goes into one all the way around the site, I don't know. But these are the questions that we've asked them to consider, because they can't be queuing into the alley, because it's not what it's designed for.
Well, and like the commissioner said, if they push the building back, they'll do what In and Out does, which basically an X
Correct.
right in front of the building instead of, I understand they want to be right on the street, but they're not going to be able to do it it will be a very short drive through at that
Yep.
point.
Yeah.
So they're going to have maybe to push the building back and.
It's going to be an interesting exercise in design,
Yeah.
so to speak. Obviously, ideally, if you could have the driveway as far south on Sylvia as possible to give them as much room in the event that they have overflow.
Yeah.
But then how do you queue it into the site? And then how do you get people to exit the site? That's really the concern, is there's going to have to be a gap in some area to ensure in and out of the site.
My thing is with diagonal and parallel parking, if they're sticking out, how are you going to be looking?
And wherever the driveway goes, there's view corridors that we have to ensure that they
Yeah,
have.
that's what I'm gonna say. So
parking
that's gonna
could-
take
yes,
parking spots too.
away, yeah. They're gonna take parking spots away. As I stated, we would prefer that they were parallel stalls, not diagonal stalls, so that they don't stick out as far. But there still is also a clearance from the edge of the commercial approach that they have to be set back so that motorists can see oncoming traffic, right? So we review all those things as part of the site plan. The concern that we still have with these type of facilities is always going to be queuing into the public way.
So this recommendation is not just specific for this. You're wanting a standard that can be used for other locations.
Other walk-up facilities.
other
Specific,
types.
this is drive-through walk-up facilities that don't have any seating.
But if we're taking into consideration parking across the street and the next facility doesn't have any type of on-street parking, we can't, it's not the same standard then.
Well, it won't be approved.
Well,
Yeah,
they'll have to accommodate parking all on site at that point. They just won't be able
Yeah.
to count on street parking.
So I would say we make a proposal today, something to be added to our municipal code, or what would be our requirement of parking.
Right.
Then on a case by case basis, we can look when they propose to us, this is the site. If there isn't enough parking spaces, what's on street parking looks like, and then we'll go from there. But for the purpose of a general proposal today, I would say one parking stall every 250 square foot, or one per employee, whichever is greater. And then for the future, we'll look on a case by case basis. We'll consider on-street parking. Is it shared, non-shared? Like what's across the street? If it is shared, we'll count it as half. If it's not shared, then we'll give them full credit for one spot. And within reason, which I would say about 100 feet, it's reasonable for somebody to park and walk. More than that, they're not gonna.
So just so I'm clear, it's two separate recommendations from the chairperson that I hear. I hear one for drive-through walk-up facilities, one per 250, or
One per
the
employee,
number of employees, the highest number of employees at one time,
one shift.
whichever is greater
Sure.
between the two. In addition, for projects that have on-street parking within 100 feet and it's shared, half a stall. If it's unshared, it can be count as a full stall.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But I don't think I can make the motion.
You can.
I don't know. I was always told the chair doesn't make motions.
No, you can.
All right, well,
What I just said.
I make a motion of what I just said.
Would you like me to do it?
Sure.
All right. I move to approve parking requirements that either have a one stall per 250 square feet or one stall per employee per shift,
Maximum number of employees per shift.
maximum number of employees per shift,
Whatever is greater.
whichever is greater, and to include shared parking as 1/2 of a parking spot. And if it's non-shared, then a full parking spot
Within 100 feet of.
Then
within 100 feet of the
Of the street.
facility.
For the drive up facilities.
Whoa.
Oh. No,
Walk up, drive it.
drive up walk.
The maximum number of employees during one shift or 250 square feet per parking space, whichever is greater, is for the drive-through walk-up facilities.
Only.
For other uses that have on-street parking, the half a stall if it's shared, one stall if it's unshared within 100 feet of the site.
Correct.
Two separate things.
Yep.
Okay. I got you.
Okay, so.
I
waiting for a
second it. I second it.
Thank you. We have a first by Commissioner Garcia, second by Vice Chair Juarez. Commissioner Salas,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandu,
Yes.
and Chair Curry.
Yes,
Motion approved.
thank you. Thank you.
And just for clarification, we'll update the resolution for the chairperson's signature following the meeting.
Thank you. Oral communications. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission regarding any item over which the commission has jurisdiction. Oh, but do we need to open the public hearing now if there's any additional comments or in the end?
For this item, well, technically, yeah. I don't think there was anybody in, you can open
Okay.
the public hearing and close it.
For the record, there's no one online and no one in attendance.
All right, well, we'll go to special presentation by planner Trevor Stearns, please.
Chairperson Curry, commissioners, yeah, buckle up. It's 7:30. I'll make this as quick as possible, but obviously I want to be thorough and obviously answer any questions that you may have.
At the request of a few of the planning commissioners, this item was presented to the city council. It's a development project update. What we've tried to do, I think in the past, it was really more of like a spreadsheet or a list. What we've tried to do is create a format that makes it easier to track for planning commissioners, city council members, and members of the public so that they can see where projects are in the process. And as they move through the process, the slides will be updated accordingly so you can see the change over time as the projects come through. What you'll see is a lot of people don't understand the steps in a development project and how many there are and how long it can take. So this is really more of a full disclosure type of presentation in terms of identifying all the steps. People have questions about the steps. We can answer questions about the steps, but just really to show how long it can take a development project. So when people ask us, why is this happening, blah, 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 we can show them they're halfway through the process now. They still have to do these other items, but more or less this presentation is meant and formatted in a manner that allows for comparability over time.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager Jerome. With that being said, we have a pretty healthy list of projects in different phases in their development process life cycle. So, okay, cool. So starting off here, we have the McCall Village Apartments. This project is on the southeast corner of Nelson Boulevard and McCall Avenue. This project was previously approved by Planning Commission in 2020 via a CUP for a 20-unit multifamily apartment complex. Also included as a part of that, some community facilities such as like pool and open space, things like that. It's just north of the dentistry and other medical office facility here, and also nearby is the an apartment complex there. So this project, like I said, was originally was already approved, and right now we're working with the applicant in order to achieve a complete building permit submittal. With that, obviously, it's going to be the improvement plans, grading plans, things like that that are going to be required as a part of that. So we want to make sure that the applicant knows exactly what they need in order for the city to accept the application and for us to process those documents. And also, in addition, the city is obviously going to be ensuring that all the conditions of approval are being met as a part of that submittal as well, that the Planning Commission had approved back in 2020, 2019. If you guys have any questions about any project, feel free to jump in at any point, just so it's kind of fresh and we're just talking about it.
So the bottom green box that says building permit application submittal, that means that they have applied for the building permit, correct?
Yes, that
Okay.
is correct. So as indicated by the color coding here, the green indicates steps that are complete. And so the last green box is kind of where they're at. So if you think the building permit application submittal, in between here is the review of grading plans, building plans, improvement plans, that back and forth. And then obviously at the end of that step, once we get a accepted set of plans, then we can go ahead and development impact fees have been paid, then we can go ahead and issue that building permit
Okay,
and
thank you.
subsequent permits. Perfect. Okay. So up next. Okay, I think I have control back. Okay. Let's see. So the Amberwood track is a part of a overall specific plan that has been adopted by the city, covering most of the eastern portion of the, not necessarily the city. It's between the city limits and the sphere of influence on the east side of Selma, spanning across I believe almost 800 to 900 acres worth of land that has been previously planned under the specific plan. This is the first subdivision map or development proposal that is being proposed within this specific plan area. This was already reviewed and approved through Planning Commission and City Council, and subsequently annexed because it has been, it's located outside of the city limits. Right now, it's in between the final map and improvement plan submittal phase. The reason why we haven't crossed that bridge there is mainly due to the availability of services. You may have heard through different conversations at the city about sewer capacity concerns. Namely for this one, we have the Amberwood trunk line that's being proposed as a part of the capital improvements program. It's a large project that the city's undertaking to develop that sewer trunk line in order to facilitate a lot of the development on the east side of town, roughly going here. I don't know the exact location of it, so forgive me, but it's going to serve a lot of the eastern portion of the city and future growth expanding out eastward as well.
Or when we're breaking ground on that sewer trunk line?
The city is working on obtaining funding, and we anticipate design and construction beginning next fiscal year.
This obviously being a large scale subdivision map proposing single family residential homes, approximately between 7,000 and 8,000 square foot lots. Here we have another tentative subdivision map. This subdivision map is proposed south of the city in kind of the southwestern portion of the city, just off of McCall, north of Mountain View Avenue and south of Nebraska Avenue. Here we have the location here. This project in particular is going to also require an annexation. The city limits of the city roughly is parallel to this CID canal facility here. So the requirements for the annexation are going to be to include obviously the project property, but also additional properties in order to meet LAFCO's standards for annexations. They require squared off boundaries, and also they require the incorporation of disadvantaged communities, meeting specific criteria to be included in any adjacent annexations that are being proposed. In addition to that, the sphere of influence amendment is also going to be a requirement for this project. This project area in the city, similar to the city limits in that location, the sphere of influence in this particular area are coterminous, so they share the same line. So as a part of the city limits or the annexation, the sphere of influence will also have to be extended as well. And so staff is currently working with LAFCO to look at this area because there are several facilities out here that are being proposed as a part of future development. And so we're working through that process with applicants and LAFCO. Any questions on this one?
This has not been brought to Planning Commission as of yet.
That is correct. Yeah, it has not been brought to Planning Commission. This has been an ongoing process with the applicant. Right now, we're still within the application complete phase, meaning that the city hasn't formally accepted the application because we have these kind of outlying issues and concerns with annexation and the sphere of influence amendment. And so we're working with the applicant in order to get a better understanding or getting them on board with proposing exactly what needs to be done for the city to accept it, because subsequently LAFCO is going to have to accept that same thing. So when this comes to Planning Commission, it'll be a complete package of everything that LAFCO is going to be requiring.
And these are single family homes, correct?
These are single family homes. Yes, this is about 70 units, roughly approximately 7,000 square feet for each, or a minimum. We have another tentative subdivision map. This is actually a vesting map. This project is proposing approximately 300 single family residential units across 3 different development phases. We've been working with the property owner with this particular application regarding some design elements as it relates to impacts to existing facilities out there. So the map that you're going to be seeing here today, or you are seeing here today, is going to ultimately change in order to address some of those concerns that the city has in conjunction with CID, the Consolidated Irrigation District. They have facilities out there and property easements that are currently active in order to convey water to and from canals and recharge locations. This project is located just north of Dinuba Avenue between Thompson Avenue and Highland Avenue. This location is also known colloquially as the pit. It's a huge depression. So I'm sure you've seen it tons of times driving through Dinuba, and you kind of wonder what's going to go in there. So there's going to be a significant amount of investment in regards to filling that in order to maintain your grades and ensuring that drainage is going to be properly addressed with this as well. There's a few drainage facilities being proposed. Obviously, that was a big concern that staff had originally. So we have a healthy relationship working with the applicant, and we're continuing to work with the applicant.
Additionally, similar to Amberwood, there's a sewer constraint along Dinuba, which the city is also working to secure funding to address as well, which we believe will also occur in the next fiscal year.
We have a proposal for a future multifamily residential unit complex, apartment complex. What's being proposed here is 40 multifamily residential units located near the southeast or southwest corner of Thompson Avenue and Nebraska Avenue. What we see being proposed, and you may already remember seeing the parcel map being recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. So what we have indicated here is the site plan, the subsequent site plan to follow the parcel map, identifying the development of the multifamily portion. In addition to that, we're also going to be requiring a general plan amendment and a rezone in order to meet the development standards of the use being proposed. Because the multifamily residential use is not going to be consistent with the current underlying zone district, which is slated for single family residential homes. In addition to that, the proposal also it includes the development of a future commercial building. However, at this time, that's not being proposed for development as a part of the site plan. The only thing that is being considered right now is the multifamily portion. So at a subsequent date, the commercial facility is going to be a future entitlement being submitted at the planning committee or to the city, whether that be requirement of a CUP or an SPR or a site plan review would depend on whether the planning commission would see this item in the future. Questions on this one?
The location again was
Southwest of Nebraska and Thompson, just south of Ringo Park, the dog park.
thank you. Okay, that's it.
Just down the road here on Nebraska Avenue, going to Highland, specifically the northeast corner of Highland and Nebraska, we have a large-scale multifamily project with also a commercial component as well. As indicated on the site plan, we have a 2-parcel configuration that is going to include a large-scale multifamily complex here, split between 2 phases. In addition, we have a future commercial component that's also going to be included as well. Main access is going to be off of Nebraska Avenue for the multifamily portion. The future component is, or the future commercial component is going to have their own entitlement procedures, so we'll review the development standards at that time. The multifamily component is also going to offer a large community park, approximately 1 acre, to serve the immediate community here. In addition, there's going to be emergency access located to the north of the facility or the multifamily property that is going to be connecting to the existing residential subdivision.
And this is as proposed by the applicant. Staff will review the proposal as we typically do. They're proposing a 1 acre park to be dedicated where we have other park facilities immediately in the area. So staff will review it. We may not recommend an additional 1 acre park for the area because there's already park facilities in the area and it's additional maintenance, it's additional cost for the city. How would we fund those type of things? So we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of taxpayer dollars when we review projects. Just because an applicant says, hey, here's a 1 acre park, we'll review it. It might be a good idea, but we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of the community in terms of just not accepting facilities that they're going to have to pay for when there's already facilities in the area. Obviously, having as many park facilities is nice, and they're actually required to put in open space facilities as part of the multifamily to serve the multifamily. But there are park facilities in the area adjacent to the school. There, as Trevor stated, Ringo Park is also to the east. So you actually have two park facilities within walking distance of this facility. Therefore, is another park really needed that we would have to pay for, maintain, and fund for the foreseeable future? I don't know. Generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend it because we already have shortfalls of funding for other park facilities, and we don't want more park facilities and then we can't maintain all of them. We'd rather maintain the facilities that we have in good standing without taking on new facilities without a funding mechanism. Now, in future subdivisions, that might be a different story, where we tell them you have to build a park as part of your subdivision. In addition, you have to do a maintenance district, landscape maintenance district to fund the maintenance of the park that serves that neighborhood. That's a completely different story than maybe what this is being proposed as. So I just want to put that on the record that staff doesn't accept everything that applicants always propose. We have to review them to make sure that we're being good stewards to the community and that we're not taking facilities that will then become a tax burden for future residents.
So for this particular project, this would be coming to Planning Commission in the future. The proposal here is going to require several planning entitlements. This is one of the more complex projects we have. Like I'd mentioned already, there's the tentative parcel map. In addition, there's going to be a general plan amendment, a rezone, and also the site plan as well. So Planning Commission will be seeing this in the future here. As indicated by this step, we are in between the city review and processing and the review of the environmental document. So we're working with the applicant and the consultant team with the applicant in order to review and address any of the concerns that the city has regarding the environmental component there. So that takes some time. It's a large environmental document. So we're working closely with them, and hopefully in the near future, we'll have a successful project. This project is the JNC truck parking project. This was a site plan review application that was brought to the city for this business located here. This facility has been one of the facilities in the industrial park that we've been in close communication with as a part of a original code enforcement practice for businesses that have been operating without any of the proper approvals. And so we were able to contact the property owner and discuss with them what they're doing and ensure that they are going through the process, the proper channels in order to get the required approvals and also know what they need to do in regards to the improvements for their property. As mentioned on the slide here, the business is they're operating as a truck parking facility. We see those across, the 99 everywhere, mainly in industrial areas where this is located. And it's mainly to allow for truck drivers to park their trucks and their trailers safely without being, having the worry of being tampered with, rather than parking on the street or wherever they can find any parking, right? That's
An ordinance, correct, about truck parking in the city of Selma.
There is, yeah, but that ultimately that's not gonna, if they can find parking somewhere, that they're gonna park. So this offers the opportunity for these truck drivers to park their trucks and trailers in a facility that they can be certain that there's not going to be any issues.
Commissioner Garcia makes a good point. We do have a city ordinance regulating truck parking, but some people park on the other side of the city limits because they know where the city limits are, right? So facilities like these are needed to try and encourage people not to do that and to clean it up, because people do know where the city limits are and where the regulations change. So your point is well taken, but it doesn't necessarily prevent all on-street truck parking from occurring.
To go on the other side of the city limit.
For instance, a lot of property along Highland, everything east of Highland is within the city. A lot of property on the west side of Highland, just across the street, is in the county. So it just depends on what property has been annexed or not. So as a part of this project, we reviewed the site plan, we provided conditions to the applicant and the consultant team. We're undergoing the review procedures for the grading permit application. They have submitted plans to us. We've sent back comments in regards to those grading plans. So right now, we're just going through the grading permit application stage, getting them ready for that submittal that they need to make. This property in particular has some unique challenges associated with it regarding the elevation, similar to the Raven subdivision map where it's in a large inundated area. This project has similar concerns on the property as well. So we're working with the applicant to address those. So not only does the city not have the liability of approving a facility where it's within a flood zone or could cause some concern, but also the property owner and the operator won't have to deal with those types of concerns in the future.
I think to Trevor's point, during the next fiscal year, you'll see a bunch of master plans be proposed during budget time, such as a stormwater master plan that would help us with these type of issues where you have property that's significantly below maybe where the floodplain is. In this case, Nebraska and this property, if Nebraska were to be improved, all the runoff would go into the lowest point, which is this property. So part of our approval process includes notification of the property owner to record a covenant that they understand that they're in the floodplain. In the event that it does flood, they don't come to us and say, you guys never informed us that they're in the floodplain. Because I think in some instances, we're not, because of this type of facility, there's not a lot of improvement to the property. It's an existing business owner. There weren't a lot of requirements for raising the site because there's no building proposed. They are doing a drainage basin to a certain extent, but building up similar to the Raven subdivision, again, doing fill for a property of this size, for a business this size, they wouldn't go forward with it. So in an effort to be business friendly while protecting, you know, from a risk standpoint, the city, we've worked with them to have a covenant to where they're notified that they're in the floodplain, that their site could be prone to flood, but just in case they sell it to someone else, then it's on title as well. Future owners know. But if they decide to develop the site in the future, correct me if I'm wrong, they will be required to put full curb and gutter and other items in accordance with where the flood break is and items like that, if they develop the site further.
Specifically stated as an expansion of the use that's currently under operation right now, or if the use of the property changes in whatever capacity. So that's, yeah, just as Jerome mentioned, that's in order to protect the city and also protect the applicants or any future buyers. Here we have another proposal located on the southern corner of 2nd Street and Young Street, just off the off-ramp, the northbound off-ramp of State Route 99, where the current proposal here is to propose a gas station with a convenience store. This property is located within the commercial or highway commercial zone district. There are only a few properties that are zoned with this designation, namely this property and a lot of properties along 2nd Street near the 99 have this shared zoning designation. And this zoning designation is unique enough to allow for fueling stations for uses that are permitted via conditional use permit. So as a part of this proposal, the applicant is, proposing the fuel island and the convenience store with the the drive aisle access off of Young Street, due to concerns that we've had historically with access off of 2nd Street for businesses, namely, obviously, the item that we discussed today, but also some existing businesses as well that we unfortunately cannot change. But moving forward, as this area develops, especially the property to the north as well, which you may recall, the gas station just north of this property as well. They were proposing some access, ingress and egress off of Second Street, and the city was firm in their requirements for restricted access off of Second Street. And so that's what we've seen done in the past, and that's what we want to continue as much as possible without significantly affecting the project overall, where it wouldn't be feasible for the parcel to be developed, because the city has to maintain that balance of ensuring that the city's interests and public safety and public welfare is maintained, but also not there to kill projects essentially. So we want to reach that sweet middle ground with these types of projects. Any questions on this one? It'll be a great place to get gas on that intersection. You have lots of options. Here we have this project, the Rose Avenue tentative subdivision map. This subdivision map is effectively an extension of the existing Country Club Lane subdivision that is on the east side of town, located just north of Rose Avenue. It'll be near the south or the northeast corner of Rose and I believe Orange or Millditch, that diagonal road that traverses the eastern boundary of the city. This specific proposal is, like I mentioned, it's effectively a continuation of the existing subdivision map. So it's zoned as a large lot single family residence, and what they're proposing is consistent with that. So what we're seeing here is a variety of different large scale residential homes spanning between, I think, 10,000 and 12,000 square foot lots. So that's consistent obviously with the development to the east. What's interesting about this particular project is the eastern boundary of the project. As you see here, Outlot A is designated as a remainder parcel with parentheses of a park site. In addition, they've also indicated that they want to improve this area to act as a storm drain basin. So effectively, those requirements are mandated by the municipal code, and also with the availability of services that the city provides regarding storm drain facilities, they would need to provide some on-site storm drain retention until services are extended out to this property, which they're currently not. So at that time, the proposed basin may be removed. However, as a part of this project, if it develops, the proposed project would require that storm drain basin. In addition, the eastern boundary of the project site also has a large high transmission PG&E or PG&E towers that runs north-south here, and that's also continued into to the north. If you guys can kind of picture it, the Amberwood specific plan area next to the middle school, and where the previous Amberwood track was being shown. I think I have a better aerial. Yeah. So this is where the Rose Avenue tentative subdivision map is located. And so traveling north of that, the high powered transmission line travels north along the Del Rey alignment. And that also cuts almost directly in the middle of the Amberwood specific plan. And so we are working with the applicant right now. At this stage, I'll go back to the specific checklist slide there, but right now we're working with the applicant to revise the site plan in order to create or to incorporate amenities that are proposed as a part of the Amberwood specific plan as a continuation for this property here. One being that it would allow for a reduced impact to the PG&E high power transmission lines due to the specific development standards that are required when you're proposing a development under those transmission lines. PG&E has specific standards, what can and can't be there. In addition, it allows for the city to provide a option for green space, and in particular, continuation of green space. One thing, Jerome, correct me if I'm wrong, or you can add to it. The city in the future is going to be looking for the enhancement of green space within the city, and with that comes the availability or the variety of parks and open space and walking trails and things like that. As a part of this specific plan, there is a unique component to it where there's a large parkway facility that's located under the high power transmission line that runs north-south along this area of the city, where there's trail facilities, there's parks, there's ponds, there's trees. A good example maybe would be the Dry Creek Trail in Clovis. I don't know if you guys have been there, but it would be akin to that, except instead of a river there, there's going to be the transmission lines, but there's going to be waterways there too. So it allows for the city to use this as a dual purpose because nothing can be built there as a part of the PG&E transmission line standards.
Yeah, I mean, it's really capitalizing on something that's really unusable, right? The transmission lines make it really hard to build anything, develop anything underneath. You can't put drainage basins, you can't put housing, you can't put buildings. You can put trails because they're very permanent. They don't restrict access or maintenance of the PG&E facility. So PG&E is usually amenable to allowing those type of items within their easement areas. As part of this project, capitalizing on the Amberwood planning that's already been done, you can identify that there's a clear linear park through the middle of Amberwood, and we just want to continue that so that more people in town can enjoy those amenities. Obviously, an active transportation plan, bike and ped plan, trail plan, parks plan is one of the items within the next fiscal year that we are looking at doing a parks plan for sure. But incorporating items like this wherever possible and ensuring that we're not just leaving an area unusable, it enhances the project. It does a lot of things for that neighborhood. So we just want to make sure that we're always keeping options open where there's facilities that we can capitalize on in this case, whereas with the other projects, do we have too many facilities? In this case, we're continuing or starting that trail, that linear park for Amberwood, all the way down to Rose. So, like Trevor said, in this case, it's really a matter of necessity because you would just have that piece, that remainder piece as nothing. It's not really deep enough for a park facility, so it lends itself to that linear park. As far as if you want to go back to the slide, the drainage basin, there are facilities in the area. The applicant's engineer is tasked with determining capacity of the basin in that area and if connecting to the existing storm drain facilities is feasible, if the conveyance infrastructure that's there can carry their runoff to the basin. Does the basin have capacity? Does it need to be excavated more? Those are the type of things that the project engineer for the applicant is tasked with doing. Staff provides the information, but it's really up to them to determine, do they want to do that route and connect the city facilities, or do they want to build the facilities within their own project? And at that point, they would also be tasked with maintaining those facilities. Cities should not maintain temporary facilities, and that permanent facilities will be installed. And you see that, I'm sorry, Trevor, you see that in City of Fresno on a regular basis. They actually have their own flood control district that maintains all their basins. The temporary basins that were within subdivisions are maintained by the original developer of that subdivision, not by the city. So in subdivisions where you see a drainage basin that is actually 5 record lots. It's probably like 5 single-family lots that have been dug out. Those are still maintained and owned by the original developer. And at the time that Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District builds a basin and there's conveyance infrastructure that goes to that subdivision, at that time they can fill those lots in and develop them for housing. But until then, the city doesn't take ownership of the basins. The district doesn't take ownership of the basins. They're maintained by the developer.
Any questions on this project? Alrighty, moving along. Thompson Estates tentative subdivision map is another project that we have on our activity list here. This project is located south of Blaine Avenue between Mitchell and Thompson Avenue. This project in particular is proposing roughly 144 single-family residential units across what appears to be 3 parcels. These 2 being 1 parcel. You can see here that there's a clear delineation between those parcels. That was intended to be the future alignment of Blaine. I'm sorry. I think it's Booth Avenue. Booth Avenue was a future road there. However, as a part of the subdivision map, we're proposing to abandon that alignment there and build out Saginaw fully south of the project there. So this is one of the residential subdivision maps that's actually going to be developing lots that are going to be smaller than the prescribed standard as a part of the development standards required by the Selma Municipal Code. So as a part of this, Planning Commission would also see this project come forward, and you would be recommending approval to City Council for the approval of this project, but then also the planned unit development as well, proposing for those smaller lots.
And to add to that, the zoning code has limitations on square footage of lots. We recently did a general plan amendment that is based off density, right? And what we told the Planning Commission and the City Council was those smaller lot projects would come before you for review to determine if there were certain amenities, design criteria, other development standards as part of that PUD that the Planning Commission, ultimately the City Council, wanted to include. This would be one of those examples where they meet the density requirement, which is technically lower than what the zoning ordinance allows, but is consistent with the general plan, which was the whole issue, right? But in this case, because it's a planned unit development, they'll prescribe street widths, sidewalks, landscaping, setbacks, and those type of things that would all be subject to a review by the Planning Commission and a recommendation to the City Council on how to proceed with that design for that subdivision that has smaller lots than maybe have been typically developed in the city of Selma.
Do you have an approximate size of these lots?
They vary between 5,000 and 7,000 square feet. You're going to see the 7,000 square foot lots or the larger lots near the curvilinear lots, the pie-shaped lots. Also, some of the cul-de-sac lots are going to be a little.
And if I could add, from a developer standpoint, with the cost of land, having higher density makes it a project that pencils for the most part, right? So our municipal code was really limiting in that fact from a developer standpoint, in that you couldn't necessarily capitalize on what you paid for the lot, right? And break even because you couldn't get as many lots to sell based off of material cost, concrete, PVC, all of those items. Windows went up like, I don't even know, like 200% since 2020. So the provisions for the density requirement is helpful. The square footage minimum was an issue from a developer standpoint in terms of being able to make the project be able to move forward from a financial standpoint. So it was helpful.
And in addition to, I mean, during the discussion of the general plan amendment, as Jerome mentioned, the city had this limiting factor associated with the general plan regarding lot size requirements. In addition to that, it allows for the city to be a steward for newer types of developments. Getting a greater variety of housing having those options for people, especially new home buyers, would be very attractive in the marketplace. So being able to provide these variations in lot sizes and also housing types is going to be more beneficial for Selma in the long term. Any questions on this one? Loosely, are you going to mention the park?
Nah, but I was gonna talk about the annexation.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
So this project, the city limits go to the southern property line of those residential homes on Yerba. So you would have to include the properties north of Blaine and south of Blaine next to the red lots outlined in red. In order to make this annexation feasible from a LAFCO standpoint. We're working through that with the applicant because there's going to have to be some negotiations with those property owners, depending on how many registered voters there are out in that area. It could change the type of annexation it is from uninhabited to an inhabited annexation. So for LAFCO, what is it, nerdery? It's a really nerd thing that I know this. 12 registered voters changes the type of annexation it is from inhabited to uninhabited. Uninhabited annexations are based off of property value only, right? So 50% of the property value, whoever controls that controls the whole annexation. When it becomes an inhabited annexation, it becomes registered voter based. If you have 12 registered voters, you need 7 registered voters to control the annexation. In terms of registered voter count, there's no houses out here within the project area. So if there's 12 registered voters, the project proponent doesn't control the annexation. So that's why there needs to be some discussion with the property owners over being annexed to the city, because there are homes out there that are more rural residential style that have specific county zoning requirements, maybe for animals, other things that they don't want to succumb to what the city zoning is. So the discussions will be with those property owners over, if I'm annexed, what are my land use restrictions? Do they change? How are they enforced? What am I allowed to do? Am I going to be taxed more? What are your services costs? These are all part of the discussion. So from a project standpoint, you can see that this is still at the project application. These are the types of discussions that we have to have with property owners when they propose something, and they have to bring people along with them. So it can bog down the process because they may not have thought of this when they propose their project.
Annexations in and of itself are a factor of a project that could that requires a lot of time and attention to it, because it's not just the city taking a look at it. It's ultimately going to be approved by LAFCO. And so what we need to do as the city, in conjunction with collaboration with the developer, is to ensure that LAFCO is in agreement to what is being proposed, especially at this beginning phase, because in the event that that doesn't happen and the project moves forward and then it gets to LAFCO's door and LAFCO's wondering what the heck is this annexation exhibit or the boundary for annexation proposal? Right. You're creating an island or you're creating a peninsula, and they're not going to accept that and has to go back to the city.
And to that point, the reason we include LAFCO early on is because they use the city's environmental document. If the environmental document doesn't include all the project components, such as the additional properties included within the annexation area, LAFCO can't approve it. They'll have to go back and do another environmental document. They're actually what's termed as a responsible agency that will use our environmental document for a subsequent permit that they review and approve, which would be the annexation proposal. So understanding all the components of the project, how many other agencies have approval authority, go into those initial discussions that we have with applicants to help them prepare a project description of everything that's encompassing of what is deemed their project.
Oh, mention of the park, correct. Not related to this project specifically, because it's its own process. However, the property owner was of this subdivision, and I believe the subsequent developer was willing to grant the city his property south of this location to for the future development of a park. And it was approximately 10 acres of park space that was granted to the city. So it is loosely related to this project. However, it's on its own separate path in regards to development, environmental review, and approval. The city is taking that as a separate item. And that's moving forward on its own timeline.
For the purposes of the annexation and the sphere of influence amendment, they are included. The city is doing their own construction documents and environmental review once this property is annexed to the city, because we have no land use authority in the county. And we don't want to go through the county to approve things like our own park facilities. So when this property is annexed to the city, we will then, based on a recent zoning code update, this will be subject to a site plan review by the city for construction of the park.
Alrighty, any questions on this one?
Oh, I'm sorry, if you go back. In addition, they are also proposing their own drainage facility as part of this project. So will we review that and determine maintenance of that facility? Who's maintaining it? For how long? Are there regional facilities? Can this be dedicated as a regional facility to the city? And then at that point, we would take it because there would be other property that could drain to it.
Next project we have here is the bubble wash renovation project. This project is a site plan review project. The existing bubble wash facility offers fueling opportunities in addition to a existing car wash at the location of the northwest corner of Floral and Whitson Avenue. This project specifically is regarding the expansion here of the existing facility to add the use of a convenience store. It's approximately a 900 square foot convenience store. The impacts are going to be not significant. However, the city reviewed this project under, the consistent development standards, engineering standards, and building standards. And so we've met with the applicant and we discussed the conditions of approval as we prepared them, and we issued the site plan review final action letter with the attached conditions associated with that. So at this point, it is moving on from the planning phase onto the preparation of building, grading, improvement documentation to set themselves up for the inevitable building permit application submittal in the next phase. So construction is definitely in the on the horizon for this project, and so the city is working with the developer and contractor when they prepare those plans. Any questions on this one? Here we have the Raj apartment project. You may have, this was approved this year, I believe, by the Planning Commission. And well, it was recommended for approval by Planning Commission and approved subsequently by the City Council. This project in particular, proposing 6 units total, 3 duplexes with some on-site parking there on the southeast corner of Nebraska and oh geez, I forgot a label. Mitchell, Nebraska and Mitchell Avenue, located on the corner right here. Currently that site is relatively vacant with a dilapidated house. So the project has already been approved, like I had mentioned, and we're working with the developer to meet those conditions of approval as they are moving forward to preparing those building permit documents that we require as a part of that application, such as the building plans, improvement plans, grading plans, things like that. This project is fairly simple in regards to the overall development. It's a small site, it's a small project, parking on site. So it was able to move through the process in a relatively quick manner. So any questions on this project? All right, we have, next up, we have the Kendallwood Suite project. It's a proposed hotel on the, it's not really near a corner, but it's south of the Walmart, the shopping center on Floral Avenue. It's this roughly 2.5 acre parcel here, and it is proposing approximately 107 rooms as a part of the overall development of this piece here. It is not in conjunction with any other development within the area. It's its own standalone property and project. The proposal is also going to require an annexation. This property, or I should say Floral Avenue right here, is the city limit line. And therefore, any property south of Floral Avenue in this area here is going to require that subsequent annexation. This project is also going to require environmental review. As we know, this project area has some concerns with traffic and the increase in traffic as development is being proposed. And so that is all going to be adequately analyzed under that environmental review document. And it's going to come to Planning Commission for their consideration and I believe recommendation to City Council ultimately. Any questions on this one?
This is not part of the 50 acre project that is in the far future that we've talked about.
So there's two large scale development projects that are currently in different life cycles with the city. One being north of Floral and one being south of Floral. The north of Floral is the one that came to Planning Commission earlier this year regarding the development of the Selma Grove project. That one was approximately 50-60 acres, all pertaining to commercial development. That is not a part of this project. Subsequently, there is another project that is within the vicinity of this project, and that is proposing a mixed use component between commercial and residential, and that is not, this project is not a part of that either.
Thank you.
Moving on here. As previously mentioned, the project within the vicinity is the Casitas Development Project. As you can see, that previous slide, that parcel is currently located right there. So this project is the mixed use. It's going to provide different housing opportunities between senior living, lower income or affordable multifamily housing, and market rate housing. And also it's going to provide a lot of options for commercial development towards the north adjacent to Floral Avenue there. There's the tentative subdivision map is going to propose several parcels to allow for developers to purchase land and develop as proposed. Moving forward in the future, the configuration of the project here allows for circulation and connectivity between Stillman Avenue or Stillman Street to allow for southern access to the project site rather than maintaining only access off of Floral Avenue to reduce some further congestion issues that we've seen here at the city. In addition, the applicant is also revising the site plan to allow for future connectivity or potential connectivity via pedestrian walkways to and from the adjacent commercial property. The Burlesque Shopping Center right there, there's going to be proposals for connectivity there. In addition, there's going to be a large park component here to enhance the walkability of the area, because the intention here is the residents here would be able to assess their needs, their commercial needs, just by walking rather than having to drive and further kind of congest the area there. So the intention ultimately for the project, like I'd mentioned, is to continue Stillman Street to the project's extent, also offering connectivity there. And then the future alignment of Stillman is going to be proposed by the city to continue further. So that's an ongoing conversation that we're having with developers and internally here at the city.
And if I can add, as Trevor stated, you know, the connection south to Stillman, I think partially alleviates the concern. Floral Avenue for traffic, which was a concern of the Planning Commission for the Selma Grove project. Staff is, I think I've brought it up a couple of times, that staff is reviewing that recommendation in terms of its applicability to the overall decision pending before the city council for that project and whether it can be enforced. I can state as early as tomorrow at 8:30, we are meeting with Caltrans to go over some immediate improvements. Oh, cool. Thank you. Some immediate improvements to Floral Avenue to try and address some of the eastbound congestion and queuing to Highland Avenue northbound on 99. We think that there are some immediate and relatively affordable construction items that we can make to that intersection to at least increase the queuing, which is the biggest concern, I think, for a lot of eastbound traffic. So staff has heard, you know, the Planning Commission, and we're trying to make strides immediately while also balancing what we're legally obligated to do as it relates to development projects. That doesn't mean that we're ignoring this in the big picture. We are looking at various options such as this project and encouraging access to Stillman for 43, as well as looking some of the longer standing options, you know, a bypass from Dinuba Avenue further south to maybe Nebraska to connect back to 43 in the southwest part of town. That's in the general plan. That's in the development impact fee program. But really what staff is trying to do is follow the direction given by the Planning Commission that this is an issue. How do we address this issue? Again, while balancing what our legal obligations are to keep projects moving that have already been entitled for one, but not necessarily inhibit future development.
Any questions on this project? All right, we're nearing the end here. So the proposal here for the medical clinic, as you mentioned, or as mentioned during this meeting, we're actually at this green step here. So we're in the midst of.
There should be another one in there where construction started because they've been issued a grading permit.
At risk
grading permit.
permit. Yeah. So if you've noticed some activity on the site, they are currently pursuing some at-risk grading. Right. And so the decision tonight would allow them to move forward with the finalization of the building permit application documents, such as like the grading plan, improvement plans, things like that, in order for them to move forward through the process. So the city made the determination to move forward with the at-risk portion because of the understanding of the complications with the parking requirement, and the overall layout of the site was not going to change significantly, if at all. So the city felt comfortable enough to pursue the at-risk grading activities on site because the site is not going to change, or the project is not going to change.
We are reasonable in our office to keep things moving. When it makes sense, when it's not like catastrophic, when it's an understanding amongst the applicant as to why we're doing something, and they have an understanding of what they're getting into, and we're in agreement with it, we will be accommodating. We want to see projects go forward without any hindrance. That doesn't mean that there's not a process. That doesn't mean that there's not requirements that we have to meet. In this case, an at-risk grading permit is absolutely acceptable in this instance, because as Trevor said, the footprint of the building wasn't changing. The footprint of the parking lot really wasn't changing. It was a matter of how much parking did they actually need legally for us to approve the building permit. So from a grading standpoint, there wasn't really any issue with them starting grading out there.
This project, the outsource industrial project, similar to the JNC trucking project, as a part of that code enforcement effort, reaching out to businesses that are operating out there without proper approvals or sites that haven't been approved consistent with the development standards of the city. We've gotten a few applications in as a part of that procedure, and this was one of them. This actually ended up being two separate site plans, one indicating the development of this lot here to allow for the development of an office building and also a maintenance building as a 2-in-1 there. In addition, the revised subsequent site plan application allowed for the usage of the surrounding parcels you see indicated in red over here and over here. The purpose of that was so that we can maintain a consistency in our development standards and how we apply them to properties and projects moving forward, and especially in the industrial area where not a lot of activity occurs. We do see instances where businesses kind of spring up and they start operating. And so this is an opportunity for us to connect with those property owners or business operators and let them know of the proper channels to go through in order to be in compliance with the city's municipal code. And so working with Outsource, we've been achieving that. In addition, working with JNC, we've been also achieving that as well. So these are just the first couple that we're working with. Obviously, there's going to be more that are going to be coming down the pipeline and obviously notified as a part of the project development list and future presentations that we're going to be making here at Planning Commission and City Council. This project was just a site plan. We've reviewed the proposal. Conditions have been issued. Final action letters have been issued. Right now, they're working to prepare submittals for building, grading, and improvement plans as a part of their ultimate project. So they're going to be preparing that submittal, ultimately seeking a building permit or an issuance of a building permit. Any questions on this one? All righty. Here we go. The Selma Grove project. All you are fairly familiar with it. Nothing has changed in regards to what you had seen at Planning Commission, large scale commercial project. At this step here, we obviously completed the Planning Commission hearing portion, and in conjunction with the recommendation from Planning Commission, also with the ongoing development and coordination with Caltrans as to their feasibility study, review of that feasibility study, and some of the recommendations they provided, in addition to the improvements that are also required as a part of this project and the environmental review. Staff was internally meeting as to what the city or how the city can move forward legally with this particular project regarding the recommendation of Planning Commission and subsequent recommendation to City Council. And so we've been working with the applicant and Caltrans on that collaborative effort to see this project move forward.
Staff has reiterated Planning Commission's concern regarding traffic along Floral Avenue. We're working with them to develop timing of their improvements on Floral. What's going to be their opening day improvements and other items like that. So we're working with them based on Planning Commission's direction to identify how to resolve these traffic issues on Floral. They understand those concerns. The project will likely have some sort of development agreement where they do some of those improvements on Floral. In turn, maybe they receive credit for their impact fees rather than giving them to us and having us build the facilities. We would always prefer that the developers build the facilities and they get credit for it. So that's part of the discussion with the applicants group as part of their consideration for City Council.
Any questions on this particular project? The FCRTA maintenance facility. This was a previous site plan review application they've received the final action letter conditions of approval, and I think they're at this stage here.
And didn't we have a groundbreaking ceremony for that?
Yeah, they're
Oh, okay, so they haven't really
they haven't
started.
started grading activities, but I think they're getting close to a finalized set of grading and building plans. So they're moving through the process. So this would be updated to reflect that they've completed that stage. So in all actuality, this is kind of the stage that they're looking forward to jumping to next. So this project is moving forward. We're as a city, as a partner with FCRTA, we're excited to see this project moving forward. The project that you guys are fairly familiar with already. We're at the planning application submittal phase. In between that and the project or the application acceptance phase, we were able to make that determination on parking standards this evening. And so we can relay that information back to the applicant in addition to the concerns that we've already outlined to them as a part of our completeness review for the application. So we're going to be diligently working with them in order to achieve a compliant site plan that both achieves the intentions and goals of the developer, but also the city is comfortable with in terms of the layout of the site. Lastly, we have a new facility or new application that just came through. It's site plan review application located on the southern corner of McCall and West Front, just south of the railroad crossing, just south of City Hall. This facility here is the relocation and expansion of the Camacho Tires facility that's located just off of 2nd Street right here. They've been in the community for quite some time and they're a valuable partner of the community. And we've been working diligently with the applicant and their contractor in order to ensure that the site plan meets all of the development standards of the municipal code. There had been some challenges with the site itself. Namely, this is very unique and it wasn't caught until the city reviewed the application that actually the project site contains 2 parcels that the property owner owns. There is a 3rd parcel that is 2 feet wide that extends from the frontage on West Front Street into the property approximately 80 feet. And that was not caught by anybody until it was submitted to the city. And we recognize this and we let them know. Originally, the site plan indicated that their ADA parking stall was going to be in this parking lot here. And obviously the path of travel was from that ADA stall traveling to the building as, you know, the path of least resistance. It's the closest option. However,
Someone else owns that parcel?
someone else owns the parcel, and that someone else happened to have moved into Arizona and subsequently passed away. So regarding the procedure in order to approve, we wouldn't be able to approve any improvements to that property without the consent of the property owner, and
No heirs?
the effort that would be involved in order to track down the next of kin would be tremendous on the applicant side. And so those options were laid out to the applicant and contractor regarding, you know, the option to obtain ownership of that property and do a lot line adjustment and clean the property in regards to any parcel issues that we see here, or you can design around it. And the path of least resistance that was identified by the applicant was to design around it, because unfortunately, getting a hold of next of kin, getting them to sell you the property, it would be too cumbersome for the applicant to move forward with this.
Could that be an eminent domain
I was gonna.
situation?
No,
The-
I mean, open and notorious use, anybody is paying the property taxes on that parcel?
I believe the property,
Property taxes would be paid on that. The value would be so low that it would be like fraction of a dollar, what have you.
Yeah.
But eventually, lack of payment of taxes, it would go to auction by the county tax collector.
Yeah.
But then anybody can buy it.
And
So
open and notorious use would not apply if the next of kin is not here, nobody's using it, and he puts it to his use and nobody complains over a certain period of time, then it becomes his.
correct. I mean, you're talking about prescriptive rights over time.
Right.
There is no prescriptive right now because it's a vacant site. He could legally not use that property. We're aware of it. We have to tell him that's not his property. We can't approve it with the assumption that he's going to use someone else's property. We just can't.
Yeah.
You know, so if it had been a historical use over time and they had permission from the property owner to use it, but there was no recorded easement, there was no document, memorializing the use of that property, and there had been a historical use over it, and they were adding to the building or something, and then he passed away, then there would be a claim maybe for some prescriptive rights over that property. But because the site is vacant, there hasn't been use in that manner.
Yeah.
We can't all of a sudden say, oh, there's prescriptive use of
Okay,
that
I
property
see.
over it. Eminent domain's interesting. We'd have to make a public finding of necessity for that property for private use, and I don't think we can do
Yeah,
that.
no, I.
You know what I
think
mean?
the
So
eminent domain is for public use.
for
not
public use,
private
correct.
use.
So we
But
could
can't it also be used for,
condemnation,
Yeah.
maybe. Again, it'd be more condemnation for a safety use. Public safety is usually what condemnation's for buildings that are not safe to occupy, structures that are a public hazard, something like that. We could talk to the city attorney about if there's any other options. Megan's available right there. I'm not sure what our options are in terms of proceeding in that fashion.
I think it would also set a precedent for the city as well.
Right.
That could be an issue later on where developers are understanding that the city is willing to enforce their police powers on behalf of developers, which I don't think that that's in the city's best interest.
And again, there's specific findings the city has to make in order to do those things. I don't know how we would make those findings in this instance.
I would say just best is to keep an eye if taxes are gonna get paid, because if the next of kin isn't aware that there's this parcel, they're not gonna bother with it, and it's so tiny. And it might really, after a certain number of years, go to auction, and then he would.
They are aware of it, and
Oh.
I believe there's actually an auction date set. However, in the interest of time and inflation and everything to do with development scheduling, time is money, correct?
line
The building
around it.
materials, waiting a year's time to purchase that property from auction.
And there's no guarantee that they would get it at auction.
Right.
Right. That would significantly prolong the project and ultimately, increase the cost of the overall project itself. So the best case scenario to move the project forward in a timely manner is to plan around it, albeit it's not the most ideal because there's going to be a parking lot here, a business here, and then there's going to be a 2-foot fenced property right there. Because we can't authorize any access to that property as a part of this project at all. So
crazy.
yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation that
Yeah. Well, that's all.
that this was the property owner was put in when he acquired the property. And at some point, whoever his representation was didn't catch that the property was actually affected by that strip of land.
Title or nobody saw the.
The 2-foot missing in the middle of the site,
It's on the title, I believe. But
probably like an omission or an
Yeah.
exception, accepting out 2 feet, for whatever.
yeah, if you just look at an APN map, though, it's very hard to discern. And I think that may have been one
What
of
they
the
used,
issues.
yeah.
Thank you. Was that the last one?
Yeah, that's the last one. So
But thanks
So,
for that
so
presentation.
that's our presentation. My taking away from that is make sure your applicants, if you have anybody in the community, make sure they do their due diligence properly, right? But anytime you guys have questions about projects, proposed projects, ongoing projects, fictional projects that you heard about, feel free to give Trevor, Lupe, or myself a call. We're always open to discussing projects as they come in. We actually found out about one of the projects on the agenda through a conversation after the Parks and Rec Commission. Community Services Director. That's how I found out about item number 4 coming forward. So, we hear things from different people before we even get it. So if you guys hear things and you're curious, I think most of you know our doors are always open.
Well, I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you so much, everyone.
Move to adjourn.
At 8:45.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
You.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank
Megan.
you. Good night.
Are we adjourned?